One of the exciting things that I'm knowing is happening soon, and I'm happy to share with you all, is that this is going to be an intersection that's going to be pedestrianized through a pilot later this year to dramatically expand a plaza that could then better house events, activities, civic gatherings. Old South Meeting House is coming up on the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, and we just want to make the ability to have people gather in an open air environment and on a day as nice as today more accessible than when we're dodging cars.
Hi, and welcome to Unplanned, the show about cities and how they work. I'm Sam, your host, and today we're in downtown Boston with Michael Nichols, the head of the Boston Business Improvement District, and we're going to learn all about bids with a great host. And Michael, welcome to Unplanned.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
All right, so let's dig right in. First of all, where are we right now, and what's your job? What do you do? So where are we sitting?
So we're sitting in the heart of downtown Boston in Downtown Crossing, the kind of historical retail shopping neighborhood on just the edge of the financial district. We're square in the heart of the downtown Boston Business Improvement District, a 34-block area that comprises 280 buildings in really kind of the core central business district of downtown Boston.
And so what is a business improvement district? They've been around for a while, and I know the Boston version has been around for at least a couple of decades, I believe.
That's right.
Why don't you give us a little bit more?
Yeah, there are kind of these quirky constructs that I think have emerged out of the fact that people have over time demanded more services of cities or want more services of cities than those cities have been able to provide, financially or otherwise. And so earlier in my career, I spent time at park nonprofits, and so there are a lot of those around the country now where people privately fund and support a park nonprofit to help leverage on top of what the city or state is able to do, and the same for business improvement districts. So the property owners within a defined geographic area vote themselves into a structure that then assesses a special tax on themselves or an assessment that then gets pooled and given to a group like ours. And with those funds, depending on the bid and the neighborhood and where you are, you provide additional supplemental city services, take out the trash, remove graffiti, clean the streets, provide maps and brochures to tourists, support programming, art murals, economic impact stuff, and more.
So let's spend a second on the voting themselves in, because I know that can be a process, and there's a whole bunch of work that needs to go around getting everybody kind of on the same page to agree that this is something they want to do.
That's right.
How was it here, and what was your experience?
Yeah, that is the tough part. I think there are a lot of bids that struggle to form, and not that many that struggle to stay in place. And so there is a latent fear, I think, at the beginning of the process from property owners who are already taxed by cities, who are already taxed, and wondering, why am I being charged more for the type of services that I expect out of a city? And I think that's the utopian view, right? That every tax dollar we already get taxed can do everything we want it to do. So you mentioned that we've been around for a couple of decades. That's because we actually tried for quite some time to get formed. Our bid was formed finally on its third attempt in like 2012, 2011. So we've been around only about 12 years now, but we're after it for many years before that. And I think it took some convincing of our property owners to understand exactly what they were getting for their money.
Let's get a little bit more in the weeds here. So when you say property owners, who exactly is eligible to be part of a bid? Who do you have to convince to become part of a bid? Who is not relevant to that discussion?
Sure. I mean, I think that the rules can change by state, but I think here and in most places, owner-occupied condo residences don't count, and nonprofits don't count. They can have a voice. They often do get granted a voice informally, but it's principally commercial property owners, commercial buildings, for-profit entities, and rental real estate, as is typically owned by a single entity. And so those are the landowners that, whether or not there's a building or it's an empty parking lot, those are the ones who get asked to form the bid. In Massachusetts, and I think in many places, it sort of operates in a more functional way like Congress, where it's both the House of Reps, so he who has the bigger building or the more valuable real estate gets more vote, and also the U.S. Senate, where each property is treated equally. And so the formation requirements are that you need to get a specific percentage of the property owners everybody equal and a specific amount of the value of the buildings.
Interesting. And so we're going to get onto some of the work you actually do, like
Sure.
what is your day job in effect. But let's just spend another second on what some of the issues are that often come up when bids are proposed or when they're discussed. Because as a function of sort of city making and place making, and they are a tool, and I suspect they've become more prevalent as time has gone on. But what are some of the concerns that people have about bids? Including the taxation issue, but I'm guessing there are some others.
There are. It's jurisdictional. It's power. It's who does it seemingly get taken from? Who's it being given to? We have bids have replaced some of the traditional functions of government, or kind of supplemented them. But that has union implications, that has police implications. If you're in an area where the police view you as trying to police something that is their responsibility. And so I think those are some of the typical issues that come up at the beginning, is sort of, who is this private, unaccountable group that is now taking on the traditional role of government in any way? And are they going to be accountable to government? Are they going to be accountable to elected officials? And are they going to be accountable to their own membership? And I think it takes a certain finesse, I think, and a genuine, open, transparent conversation at the beginning around what the goal of the bid is, why it's being formed, where the money is going to go, and who's going to direct a lot of that. And that's, I think, where a lot of these conversations get caught up. But I will say that I think just about every bid has been formed to solve a problem. So bids are not typically formed in the good times. They're not typically formed when a city is operating fully well, when every retail space is leased up and office space is leased up. They tend to be in areas that need a little extra push. Downtown Crossing here in Boston was an area that has traditionally been mid-market retail, but in the 80s and 90s, as cities emptied out around America, so too did Boston. And so a push began to form our business improvement district here to solve the challenge of how to bring Downtown Crossing back, which we largely have.
So we've looked at some of the issues and we've talked about some of the issues, and I think you've been very articulate about what some of the questions are. Let's now switch to what I was calling earlier, what's your day job? So what kinds of stuff do you do? I think it's how have you solved some of the issues that you've identified, and how are you going about doing that now?
Sure. Well, those issues could really change. And obviously COVID changed everything about every downtown in America, and we can certainly talk about that. But the role of a bid changes by the needs of the city and the place. I just, prior to this shooting with you, came out of a conversation where we convened 20 mostly BIPOC business owners from around Boston for an info session about how they could have a smoother path of renting downtown vacant retail space. We have a genuine desire to both reduce the number of vacancies downtown, but also diversify from the standpoint of the owners and the businesses and the types of work that they do, the commercial offerings in downtown Boston. And so that's a really exciting part of my day, getting to actually help dream with businesses that are at early stage and interested in accessing the foot traffic and the economic power of the downtown city center for their business or their idea or their dream. And so that's really exciting. One of the major conversations that many of us have had to have around the country right now is about safety. And so the fact that so many of our downtowns around the country have been threatened by a myriad change in drug enforcement, or the impact of drugs coming from other countries, or mental health challenges, or homelessness, or all those mix of issues, the social challenges that manifest in a city center can have a really profound impact on your week. Other days, though, I'm just talking about the next cool program or art exhibit that we have coming in, and we're gearing up for summer in Boston right now. And so it's that mix of issues on the typical day, typical week.
Well, so one of the things I'd like to do with you is actually to go, we're here at this wonderful building, we have this Kennedy 1892 sort of sign, and I'm sure this has a whole history behind it, and you can tell us, but I also would be very interested to go out on the street and
Sure.
see some of this stuff. But you mentioned COVID earlier. What have you seen? What did you see, and what are you seeing now as you're coming out of COVID about where we're going and where we should be trying to go to?
Sure. I mean, the first thing everybody saw is it was lonely, right? I mean, a place that before COVID had 59 million visitors a year in downtown Boston, more than 1 million a week. Everything from tourists to theater visitors to students to office workers to residents and everybody in between. plummeted, and I think and probably had a valley of around 15 million in 2020, something on the fairly low side. And so, we've been trying to build that back. That the change to work, the change to how and where people want to spend their time today, the change to the perceptions of safety in a downtown area, because at the end of the day, I think we might still have the same number of folks that have social challenges today that we did 5 years ago, but it's not being, mixed with or diluted by as high a percentage of other folks who are here for all the kind of good and healthy reasons. And so that changes the perception of a place. And so, just last year we got up to 30 million visitors, so down from that 59 in 2019. We're on track to probably get back to maybe 40 or 45 million people this year, about 75% of where we were in 2019. We in Boston, I think, have fared better than some of our counterparts around the country based on the mix of businesses that we have in our city center. But ultimately, it's been a total shock to the system that we're all trying to still grapple with. What are the keys to why somebody would want to live, work, or visit a downtown now and in the future? I can't tell an office worker to come back to work. And frankly, I don't believe, and this may be controversial for some bid directors, I don't believe we're ever going to see 5-day-a-week foot traffic again from an office worker. I think 4 might be the best we're ever going to do, with the exception of some of the life science and lab companies that really have employees that need to be at the office 5 days a week. I think we need to pivot to who's going to be the next generation of people spending time downtown. So we're in Third Space, which is a formerly vacant retail storefront here in downtown Boston. They've been vacant for the better part of 2 years during the pandemic that our organization, the Downtown Bid, took over about 8 or 10 weeks ago to bring vibrancy and activity and awareness of this vacancy downtown. There's roughly 90 or 100 vacant storefronts that have emerged coming out of the pandemic. Again, as we've kind of recalibrated from the office worker who's no longer here and no longer seeking their haircut, their barber, their tailor, or where they want to grab a fast casual lunch. And so this was a former pret-a-manger sandwich shop that the Bid ourselves have turned into an art gallery during the day, a lunch hangout for the public. We've had art sales, fashion shows, live music events, comedy nights, and it's really become a really vibrant part of downtown in the formerly vacant space.
Let's get out on the street and look at a couple of things
Let's
out
do
there.
it.
I think that'd be great.
All right. This is the corner of where Summer Street turns into Winter Street and it intersects with Washington Street. And so this is really, when people talk about the crossing, this is what they're talking about. One of the real hallmarks of the downtown Boston Bid District is the historic sites. And so the Freedom Trail, about a third of the Freedom Trail's length runs through downtown
And
Boston.
why don't you tell us briefly what the Freedom Trail is for
Sure.
anybody who
Freedom
doesn't-
Trail is this phenomenal asset in downtown Boston, a linear path actually etched into our sidewalks in brick and other materials that signifies some of the most historic sites from the founding of America as a country and the American Revolution. And so it'll take you from the Massachusetts State House down to Old South Meeting House, down to the old State House itself. Places where the Declaration of Independence was read for the first time in Boston, where the Boston Tea Party was hatched, and so many other really incredible sites.
Now, over here on the left is a vacant storefront.
That's right.
So this is a classic urban moment here, because for most people, they just walk by this. But for somebody like you or somebody like me who's interested in cities, this is actually a really important and interesting intersection moment. So what's going on right here?
Yeah, I mean, I can't walk by any of our vacant storefronts without thinking about what might be there. And so this is one of our longer running vacancies. Some of the types of businesses that went away and didn't come back, large format bookstores. One down here turned into a large format Walgreens. The other has remained vacant for many years. And so we are constantly having conversations with kind of cool, interesting, thoughtful, folks with ideas about what this might be. There's also potentially plans, like we just saw the Third Space pop up from the Bid, that we might take this space over, be able to, it's a multi-level space, it's large format, but we think we could activate and incubate companies here, have retail businesses on the first floor, maybe have gathering spaces or conference room spaces on the upper floor. So this is actually one of those very specific spaces we're talking about right now about taking over.
And let's go see what 1 or 2 more locations and just so people can get a flavor of what's going on down here. And while we're doing that, while we're walking down the street here, tell us how do you interact with City Hall? So, and not just the police who's out on the beat here, but all the issues that City Hall wants to manage or control, and you presumably need to coordinate at least at some level with what they're trying to accomplish as well.
Yeah, I've heard from talking to my Bid counterparts around the country that many folks have an up and down relationship with their city. Very necessarily bids exist to try and help cities do what is fundamentally their responsibility, but that because of constrained resources that we talked about before, they might not be able to do. I will say I think we have an uncommonly close relationship with our city government right now. We have a new mayor in Boston, and over the just last year or so, that has really made downtown revitalization and understanding the impact on our economy, on our jobs, on people's livelihoods, especially small businesses, that how profound the impact was from COVID. And so her administration has authorized what ended up being an 85-page report, of which I've seen enough of these to be a little skeptical in my time, but I think the one that came out on downtown revitalization is really good. So we are partnering with them on grant programs for small businesses to occupy vacant retail space, talking about the reuse of buildings and trying to have an adaptive reuse to current buildings and offices that are underperforming to become other things that we need downtown. Pedestrianizing more of our downtown district, adding more fairs and festivals to appeal to tourists, and so much more. I really have felt like we have a partner with the city, and I genuinely mean that. The city can help us do everything we do a whole lot faster than we can do it on our own.
Cars, of course, play a crucial role in cities, but they also play an aggravating role in cities, as do, for many, many people, bicycles. How are you viewing the full range of accessibility, mobility, and other related issues as it relates to the bid?
Yeah, they're super important. We have probably one of the largest and I think best run pedestrianized plazas in the country. Downtown Crossing is a fairly large pedestrian zone today, and it's working incredibly well. And so I think everybody involved is looking around and saying, boy, it would be great if we could expand that a little bit. And so this is sort of that initial effort. Part of that means, the intersection of multiple mobility and bikes and e-bikes and scooters is an important thing to tackle. Ultimately, that's the way of the future in cities. I think I saw a statistic the other day that Paris has cut down on 60% of its vehicle traffic over the last 5 or 10 years by implementing more accessible transportation policies that get people out of cars and into smaller vehicles that are better for the environment, better for everybody involved. And so I think Boston's at the forefront of that of American cities. I think we're probably in the top 5 or 10 who've made that adaptation most quickly, but we've got more room to go. And honestly, it doesn't make everybody happy all the time.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for spending some time with us on Unplanned. It's been just an introduction to what you are doing here, but bids are a fascinating part of urban life, and it's wonderful to hear such a dynamic, energetic leader in one of the most important cities in America. So,
well, thank you, Sam. We call it the hub of the universe here, so we think it's one of the most important cities in America. But truly, it's been home by choice for me for 15 years, and it's a pleasure to be able to work on behalf of everybody in Boston.